But I do think that there is an element of the internet making lives a bit too easy to be able to find your group. One thing that we always have to remember when it comes to any AI is that it's a tool. It often sounds like, how can I be so sure that my screwdriver isn't going to screw in the screws I don't want it to screw in? You have that control. One of the biggest confusing areas here is, where does the credit go? If I create this masterpiece using DALL-E, do I get the credit? I mean, I came with the prompts.
All the stuff we've talked about is based on uncertainty. How do you see yourself as being relevant in perpetuity?
People are listening who need encouragement. What would you tell them?
I would say try a lot of things, as many things as you possibly can, because with that contrast, there will be something that dominates your thoughts. That's a really easy way to discover passion.
Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. It is TCU's Day. We are here live on Discord, 6 p.m. Eastern. Hang out with us if you're interested. If not, we are happy to have you listening wherever it is you are and whatever it is that you're doing. I am Kevin Lieber, and with me, as always, is Matthew Tabor.
Yeah, for now. I think I want to quit the podcast.
What?
This computer's amazing. Yeah. So look, I ripped on gamers for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think gaming peaked with Zork, and that's I'm sticking to that. But now that I understand what it's like to have a machine that absolutely flies, I'm going to start making some mistakes. I'm going to download WoW Classic. I think I know too many people who still play.
That's what you need a computer that flies for, is WoW Classic. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but they're having fun. It might be time to jump back into the game. And because of that means, I've got to find the time from something. And even though I detailed down to the hour how to have 10 hours of gaming and still be productive, I did this last week, down to the hour, I'm throwing that out the window, and I'm just going to quit the podcast and run the main gear. We've got a link in the description. You guys have to check this stuff out. It's very good. Again, the one that you're seeing here, I have the main gear Vibe, and yeah, I like it a lot. I've actually not used my normal work computer since I got this set up. This is slowly turning into the main machine. So we'll see. But yeah, that's going really well. And we'll have some details coming soon, too, about Dragon's Treasure Tea. T-Man is giving away a PS5. So stay tuned on that. And yeah, I've been drinking tea. I have a confession. Those bottles that I posted on Twitter were not actually my urine throughout the day. I brewed the tea and bottled the tea and chilled it so I could have chilled Dragon's Treasure throughout the day.
They could have been,
but anyway,
though,
Kevin,
knowing your past with storing your own urine, it's plausible. That's what I'm saying.
But I would have done that in 2-liter bottles. I would have done it in something much larger
not the
and
jars.
disposable.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, real quick before we get to tonight's guest, I just want to give everybody a rundown of this ridiculously epic lineup that we have the next month. We have Nile Red next week, followed by Bobby Duke, then Ian Hecox, one of the true OGs of YouTube. Ian from Smosh will finish up the end of this month. It will be a great run. But let's get to tonight's guest, somebody that I've known for a really long time and is long overdue to be on the Create Unknown.
Yeah, and we owe the presence of that guest to an astute manager of a Joann fabric store who decided not to hire him. Instead, he encouraged our guest to go out and grind toward his dream of making YouTube videos. And Jabrils is now a few thousand subscribers away from 500,000. He's a self-taught software engineer who's most famous for having his face identified by artificial intelligence as a grilled cheese sandwich. His path has been perfectly unconventional. He started young. He dabbled in prank videos and comedy. He worked with TCU alumna Physics Girl. He got a shout out from Bill Gates for a collab with Mark Rober and just released a 3D printable version of his Infinite Staircase. Jabrils has made a fighting game with the strategy lure of chess, and over a year ago he announced that that he'd quit following his dreams and advised us all to do the same. But everything Jabrils does is unique and intriguing. While you're trying to vlog by balancing your phone on the end of a selfie stick you got on Amazon, Jabrils created an AI drone to follow him to do it hands-free. So look, Jabrils, if you have to be expressed as grilled cheese, there are a lot of ways to make this sandwich. How would you do it? What kind of cheese? What kind of bread? And is there anything special about it?
You know, I am pretty basic when it comes to most of my sandwiches. I think I just want like sourdough, some butter, and
that was good.
American that's just a perfect grilled cheese. Like, it doesn't get any better than that. I don't need soup. I don't need anything extra. Just give me that and I'm good. But I wanna jump in real quick because we have a very topical event that you just shared with us, Matt. Kevin, how does it feel that Matt is thinking about leaving you for a computer? And it, kind of lines up with me. I'm going to talk about computers today. How does this make you feel, Kevin?
I think that's the future that we've all kind of, signed up for as we get, further and further entrenched in our technologies. In many ways, I think conceptually, we've given up a lot of things for our computers, a lot of social relationships. I mean, have either of you read about how lonely Gen Z is, which is completely paradoxical? I don't think anybody would have assumed that by opening up the entire world to communicating with one another instantly would have resulted in everyone being lonelier. It's so counterintuitive that it boggles the mind, but it's also so counterintuitive that I get, it has to be true, because who would ever think of such a thing? It's a shocking outcome of, the last 15, 20 years or so of the social media emergence.
Yeah, I find it incredibly fascinating. I'm not too read up on it in terms of articles and whatnot. I've had many conversations about it, so just take that with a grain of salt. But I do think this is like one of the most fascinating things of our eras. And I feel quite special to speak on this because I had like half of my childhood, I was forced to go outside and play with sticks. Then the other half, like I had the internet and Newgrounds and all that stuff. So I don't know. I feel like me and the people of my age had a pretty unique experience with the internet. But I do think that there is an element of the internet making lives a bit too easy to be able to find your group, And like back when I was growing up, you were forced to become friends with people that like you didn't even like, or you had at least like get on the same level of understanding with them. But nowadays with the internet, you just jump on and like everyone agrees with you. Like there's anyone that disagrees with you, you push them out. I don't think it's the greatest in terms of like social, but I'm not going to go on a rant right now.
There's got to be something different about the types of relationships that develop that leads to that loneliness, because the volume is there. The ease of it all is there. Like it was really hard to find people who were into the stuff that you were into in high school. For us, it was, like I really liked woodworking stuff back then. I can't name a single person I knew in real life in the 90s who was my age who was into that. And that was fine. I wasn't like lonely for woodworking friends. But
that'd be a good t-shirt to make for you. Lonely for woodworking friends.
But now I could probably find a Discord server with people who like talking about woodworking stuff and meet like dozens of teens who are also into it. But it's so the ease is there and you'd think that would make it better. But if everybody is lonely, then something is fundamentally different about those interactions.
I would like to add to that. I think I share a very similar experience to that, not with woodworking. I was coding back when I was younger, but it was really, really difficult for me to find other coders, especially like in the environment in which I grew up in. It was incredibly difficult. But I think that like everything has like a pro and a con to it, right? And I think the con was that like I was, quite lonely in terms of like this hobby that I had. But the pro was that like I felt unique. I felt special. I felt like this was this quality that like it was rare for me to come across. And that was quite motivating for me when I was quite younger. again, I'm not too read up on this. I don't want to make any like bold claims, but I do wonder if that has any element where it's just super easy to find a bunch of people that are like you. So it's hard to feel like motivated because you don't feel unique and special, to keep going or something. I don't know.
Yeah. There is an element of being disposable.
Yeah.
That was never there in the past. And, you say you don't want to rant on this, but you're really the perfect kind of person to talk about this kind of reality, at least to me, because you get the tech side of it in a really unique way. You get how AI works and where things are headed, but you also are firmly really grounded in that human element in a way that some of the younger people are not. Some of the more terminally online are not. And I think you've got to straddle both of those to really have a sense. And Kevin's the same, at least to me, where he's got the 1 foot in each of those two worlds. So I can see that discussion being perfectly appropriate. But Kevin, what do you think is different about those interactions as all of this stuff advances? Because, if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, it wouldn't occur to us that you could take a picture of your face and deep fake something in 10 minutes that's like impossible to identify as a fake. Whereas that's a little closer to reality now.
Yeah. I want to comment on something, Jabril, that you brought up that I had really never thought about before. And that is this element of, in the past, you could have that friend group that, maybe you don't have too much, maybe you have one thing in common and then that's it. And everything else is super different. But as a result, you also have one thing unique about yourself that you don't even really talk to with your other friends about, but that makes you feel special in a way that if you can just find 2,000 other people who not only also are into that, but are way better than you at whatever your interest is, or more dedicated or whatever, that conversely makes you feel bad about it, perhaps in another kind of counterintuitive way. I think that is actually really interesting. I remember in high school, there was one kid who watched Dragon Ball Z that I could talk to about Dragon Ball Z. And we had one class together, and every day, he and I would just talk about yesterday's episode. And that was it. That was the extent of our friendship, was just, hey, we're the only two people who watched Dragon Ball Z in, 1997 or whatever year it was. So we're going to bond over that. And then that's pretty much the extent. But you can't really have that if you could just easily find a billion Dragon Ball Z groups, well, especially now where it's so ubiquitous as opposed to 1997. But the other thing that we have a really poor time evaluating, I think, is, and this has gotten so much worse because of COVID, is the value of just being in person, like actually spending time together in person, as opposed to through Discord, like we're chatting right now, or Google Hangout or Zoom or whatever it is. Just recently, I've gone to a couple of YouTube conferences or events, essentially, that gather different YouTubers. And Jabril, you and I ran into each other actually at VidCon briefly. There's a really big difference between seeing somebody in person. There's just this sort of intangible warmth that is hard to quantify, that you feel just being in the presence of someone physically, that you can never possibly simulate through a screen. And it sounds so boomer and like so, I don't know, it sounds so hokey to talk about, but it's absolutely undeniably true. It just is.
Yeah. And I would push back on the perception of it sounding boomer. I think that like older people serve a purpose in society for a reason, right? Because they have experiences that younger people don't have. And it's why when you get older, naturally, you just become more conservative, because, you can't have society can't be driven by young people, right? Because there's so much they don't know. But yeah, 100%, I agree with you. There's so many things that are just like when we get on Discord call, the way in which we even think about interacting shifts completely, right? But if we're in person, there's so many different mannerisms and social cues that you pick up on, and it changes the way You know, like for instance, I have no idea what you smell like right now. You know, like that would completely influence the way I interact with you. You know, but 100%, I do agree. It's
like
a different
hot
thing.
dogs. I smell like hot dogs.
You smell like hot dogs.
You posted
That's a safe bet.
20 tweets about hot dogs in the last couple of days. I believe you.
Yeah. I have a question for both of you here, because as Jabrils, as you were talking about this stuff, I started to think about the friend groups in movies in the past. So like is something like the boys in Stand By Me, or the Goonies. Like in the Goonies, you have the kind of goofy, dim-witted, overweight kid. He's got an identity. You've got Chunk. You've got Data, who's like super creative and inventing things, and he's kind of off in his own world most of the time, but he's got an identity. You know, you have Mikey with his own identity. And I think back to even something like the Babysitters Club. I don't want to make this entirely male-centric here, but like Christy was the bossy kind of president of that, whereas the vice president was an artistic type, right? So everybody had their own identity. And you were saying that people get to be, or they used to be able to get to be unique. And that's gone. Well, I feel like friend groups need that differentiation. And now, if you're dealing with people who are just like you, how do you do? Who are you when everybody is the same? You know, like if you went to an event and there were 50 people there and everybody is wearing the same a t-shirt of the same band, like. That would be weird, you know, but mentally, that's the kind of thing that seems to be happening. So is there, by bringing people together so easily, is there this paradox of erasing you in the process?
Yeah, I think so. I ground like most of my thoughts in physics, the physics concept of entropy, right? Like everything has a positive and negative to it, right? And I do agree with you. Like when I was younger in my friend group, like it was very diverse in terms of like what our interests were, right? But not only did we all have the ability and opportunity to feel unique, we also had the ability and opportunity to feel useful, right? Like I was the computer guy. So if anyone had any computer issues, they'd come to me, right? We had another friend that was like really like intellectual. Like I don't know how in the hell he had the entire Wikipedia in his head. And we would go to him if there's like some concept we needed to hash out. You know, we had another dude that was like an athlete. So we'd go to him if there's anything like physically, whatever we needed to talk about or take care of. So it also gave us all an opportunity to feel useful as well to the friend group. And I do think that like that element is erased if you have a friend group that all are interested in this one thing, right? I could imagine that what would often happen is everyone would go to like the most useful person, like as often as possible. And everyone else that's under that perhaps like don't feel as useful. So that's one thing I do feel is erased, but it's interesting. I think we're getting to something really interesting here with this podcast.
It's not where I expected it to go. I have all these other questions I wanted to ask you, but hopefully we can get to. But I do think that it's worth thinking about and talking through, because like what you just said sort of goes back a second to like if you are super interested in AI art, that's something that I wanted to talk to you about. If you're super interested in AI art, and then you just make friends with people who are in that group or also super obsessed with that, and like you said, someone will rise to the top, someone will be the best at it. So then naturally you fall behind. And if you don't have anything else to lift you up, that's not a great feeling. So it does make sense that the other thing I wanted to say, at least in my experience, is that when you have this group of friends that comes together that might not even have a whole lot in common, you can tease each other in a loving way. You can like make fun of each other for your different interests. That in a way that's healthy. like let me try to be clear about that. In a way that someone should be able to make fun of you for your interest in a way that is not malicious, but is just kind of, checking you, that your thing can be perceived as being dorky and you're a dork, and that's okay. And you should be, fine and comfortable with that. So like Matt making fun of me for wearing gigantic Jinko pants in 9th grade.
Yeah.
He should.
Which I do now.
Yeah, you should make fun of me for that.
Yeah, I didn't like bully you at the time.
No. I'm not talking about
I wanna
bullying.
be clear.
I'm not talking about bullying. Bullying is a different thing. That would be, a bad
now,
version of
I
this.
can rip on you for wearing them 25 years ago. And that's fine. And, there's a long list of things that you rip on me about, right down to, bulk meat buying. And that's fine. I don't, I would feel funny if you didn't. It would be a weirdly sterile, NPC-ish relationship if people didn't rip on you for those things that made you unique.
Well, it oddly validates your unique interests too. What sort of happens in that scenario? Like me being able to identify something that you do that's like worth teasing actually validates the fact that you have a thing that's worth commenting on, making it unique. So whether it's like buying bulk meat or whatever it is, or wearing gigantic pants, it even though on the surface level it seems like, oh, this guy's making fun of me, it's like, well, you're actually in a backhanded way, but not a bad way, supporting what makes you a unique person. And who's doing that over in Discord? Like, is that happening? I don't know. It should, but I don't know if it does. Like, can you get enough of a deep enough relationship with someone online? I'm sure you can. I'm sure this happens, but it seems like it's harder.
Right. The question is like, what's the probability of it happening? Right.
Plus, if you're doing it over like text instead of in person, then a ton of interpersonal, like you mentioned earlier, visual cues and body language and tone gets lost, and that's a huge problem.
Smells. They forgot smells.
I don't know what you've been sipping, but you've got it all wrong. It's time to commit to the leaf. We've embraced the smoothness and surprising pick-me-up that tea provides. I literally drink it all day long, nearly a gallon a day, and it powers me through research, script writing, and forums on websites that I refuse to name here. But we don't drink normie NPC tea. We drink cultured and refined anime tea from the Dragon's Treasure. Kevin still likes the gunpowder green called Space Cowboy, and I've sampled nearly 40 Dragon's Treasure teas at this point. Lately, I've been slamming black teas like Kentucky Bourbon and liquefied Berserk Despair. Scottish Breakfast is deep and peaty, and I smooth it over with Sebastian's Morning Earl Grey, which has the best vanilla cream taste I think I've ever had in a cup. Give me a pot of that with a hot meatball sub from Sal's Pizza and Brooks Barbecue Chicken to wash down my last meal on death row. I highly recommend the sampler packs. You'll want to try everything just like I did. I literally have not had one tea that I wouldn't be happy to reorder. The Dragon's Wings membership fuels new tea experimentation, and the Tea of the Month Club provides a regularly scheduled surprise. And when you order from the Dragon's Treasure using code CREATE, you'll get 10% off your order. That's 10% off using the code CREATE at thedragonstreasure.com. The link's in the description. I have a question.
Yeah, hot dog smells.
So what Kevin is describing is really nuanced human behavior. Is this something that is possible for AI to deal with? Or like, let's say, so I'm having a conversation with Kevin and he rips on my things and I rip on his. If I'm having a conversation with AI, let's say it knows me, is it just going to insult me? Is it just going to be like, your mom is fat and I hope she dies? Which is not funny. No. That's not ribbing. No, that's not the kind of thing that a guy would say to a friend. No. Is that too nuanced for technology to deal with? Or do you think it's possible that that we could advance to a point where something that intricate and that delicate, which relies on all the senses you're talking about, from knowledge of the person to, you said smells. Honestly, yeah, that's really a part of the interaction. How How realistic is that?
So when it comes to the conversation of AI and like humans interfacing with AI, there's a large misconception on how that interfacing would work. So one thing that we always have to remember when it comes to any AI is that it's a tool that us humans have made, right?
Okay.
And so oftentimes, like when I hear this question, it often sounds like, how can I be so sure that my screwdriver isn't going to screw in the screws I don't want to screw in? Well, it's like you have that control.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's only going to do what you allow it to do, right? So like if we have OpenAI who has like GPT-3 and DALL-E 2 and all that stuff, right? The AI is only able to do what they train it on, right? Like they have the power to limit what it can and can't do. And so if you train it only on Reddit, like it's going to sound like a user of Reddit, right? If you train it only on Twitter, it's going to sound like a user of Twitter. It gets quite complex. And it's hard for me to like go far out into the future and see what that looks like because there's so many like technological advancements that we need to make in terms of like faster processing speeds. We need to be able to store more data more efficiently and effectively to really push these AI systems to the limits. But at this moment, it's kind of like you're just hypothesizing at this point. Anyone who makes any like bold claims that in 10 years, this is where they're just hypothesizing. At this point, AI is moving so fast, there's no telling where it's going to end up,
This terrifies me, the fact that inputs matter so much. And this is something that has come up very recently in Vsauce 2 stuff. Kevin, as you know that in the last couple videos with predictive policing and things like that, they're only strategies that come out of an algorithm are only at best as good as whatever information is being fed into that algorithm. Assuming the algorithm itself is good, it's still only as good as the data going in. And I was watching a documentary a few days ago where a guy said, if we're talking about crime prevention, you have to realize that anytime we're using data, we're only dealing with reported crimes. And that is not all crimes. That's not stopping crime. That is dealing with people who report crime. We know all sorts of classes of criminal activity that, for all sorts of reasons, don't get reported. Most famously, it's been hard in different countries to get people to come forward with sexual assault cases. Variation culturally on how comfortable people are with that. So there's a case where if you're working on data of crimes that are low reporting, well, you're not working with the right data set. So if we're talking AI and you say if it's trained on Reddit, it's going to sound like Reddit. Well, there are all sorts of people who are not online at all. I mean, right. In any capacity, any capacity. I live in a rural area and I think of a ton of people who I've known and continue to know, the ones who are still alive, who are absolutely nothing like intellectually, psychologically, emotionally, experientially, like anyone I encounter on the internet.
Can I cut in really fast?
Are they gone?
Can I cut in really fast? So this is fascinating that you say this. This is actually a problem that like almost every AI company that has like production AI is dealing with. In fact, there's a really recent example of Tesla and their it wasn't their self-driving. It was they have like a detection AI within the Tesla that will tell you like if it's a truck, if it's a car, blah, blah, blah. So these data sets often are trained in dense cities, right? And so it encompasses a bunch of scenarios that happen in dense cities. But there's a video that went up on Twitter a couple of days ago of a Tesla driving behind a horse carriage. And the AI did not know what to do with it. It was like flickering back, truck, car, plane, I don't know what it is. And so like, yeah, absolutely. It's like the data that goes into it is incredibly important. And that's one of the biggest downfalls to AI, to be honest with you, is that it doesn't have the capability to imagine,
Yeah, I just posted in the episode chat a picture from Saturday. I went to an auction. There were, as usual, lots of Amish families. When I was parking,
it's like an Amish omelet.
Yeah, omelet. Yeah, but it made it hard to park because the buggies and the horses. You didn't want to get too close to them. You can't nestle closely like you can with a car. And I never thought of that in terms of something like a self-driving car, having to deal with horses and buggies on the road. That's really interesting. But I wonder, people talk about parking. Oh God, these people are so fast. Thank you, Charles Kahn. But people have talked in the past about languages disappearing as, remote tribes in the Amazon or something like that die out, or just whatever. Losing
not
all of
even.
these
It doesn't have to be remote. There are so many languages.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Don't they decay like hundreds and hundreds a year or something?
Oh yeah, so many, like almost every day. When you see those statistics about like how many animals go extinct, it's like a similar thing to that. It's like a crazy number of languages.
Wait, so can I
disappear?
This is really fascinating to me. The idea of like extinction of things, and I know there's like a big movement to like preserve like things that might go extinct. And some of which I deeply agree with, especially like games and software and stuff like that. But I wonder, things like animals going extinct, how important is it that we preserve like animals going extinct? This may be a controversial take, but where I'm going with this is that like the ecosystem will eventually solve itself out. And I think it's next to impossible to stop. Like even the universe itself is moving towards homogeny, right? Like the universe at some point is going to be flatline the same temperature across the board. And that is rooted also in like the nature of Earth and the nature of us. I don't know. I've never said this out loud publicly. I'm curious to get your take.
It's come up with mosquitoes because there have been people who, have seriously put forward for consideration, let's wipe out mosquitoes, because
to hell with mosquitoes. I'm down with that. To hell with them all. I
mean, they kill so many people through malaria. There is not any fantastic benefit to them. They're really, as far as nuisances go on this earth, they rank up pretty high, and it would be tough to find another one. Like even bees that sting you do 10 million other amazing things. So yeah, you'd keep them. Snakes eat things that we don't want around, but mosquitoes really just hurt us, annoy us, and kill us. But when that comes forward, it's that question of, do we have the right to do this? Are we harming, like, does biodiversity need to be preserved at all costs? What are the ethics around this? And I don't know the right answers. I mean, I think I would pull the trigger on mosquitoes, but at the same time, does that have this butterfly effect kind of thing that launches a problem that's 10 times worse than mosquitoes? I really don't know.
Sure. But I mean, if you look through history, like mosquitoes wouldn't be the only thing that went extinct, right? Like I'd have to do some research into like what are some cascading effects of like prior animals going extinct. But I'd argue that like nature has a way to figure itself out. And I think like the example exactly what I was talking about is pandas. I remember for a while pandas were endangered. I don't know if they still are, but it was because pandas didn't want to have sex. And it's like, well, are we responsible for forcing them to do this thing? Like, and then what is at stake? Like, it was just really confusing to me,
We like pandas. They're cute. Panda stuffed animals are great. We can sell lots of them. Incel pandas.
Well, I'll tell you.
That's vol-cell pandas. Voluntarily celibate.
Well, Kevin, we have a lot of AI models that remember what pandas look like, so they'll still be with us in spirit. All right.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. It seems like a complex one, but I think I would err towards trying to not like purposefully wipe things out. I would err towards trying to keep them. I don't know how much intervention is required on humans to, like you said, perhaps preserve things that don't want to be preserved. But like, do they really not want to be preserved? Like, how much do we actually know about what pandas want? Probably nothing. So I don't know. Sure. I'm not quite happy making that decision for them.
Everything has a cost, right? Like, would you feel comfortable if you heard the government saying, like, we're investing $1 billion to preserve pandas? Like, we want to make sure they don't go extinct. You know what I mean? Like, everything has a cost to it, right? At the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure the Chinese government has spent a lot of money on pandas. I don't know what they spent on that, but as far as I know, it worked. Aren't pandas doing just fine now?
I think
so. From what I understand, I don't think they're even on the endangered list anymore. But I wanted to circle back a second because one of the big questions I wanted to ask you was was based on the conversation of AI. So we had Psychic Pebbles on the podcast a few months ago, and we got into this whole discussion about AI and art. And obviously, there's a lot of AI creating art right now with DALL-E 2, Mid-Journey. There's a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
But, Zach was basically talking about his hypothesis about how AI eventually would be able to create better movie scripts and better TV shows and better absolutely everything you could imagine eventually than human beings could. That was something that he posited. I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Can I first ask, Zach, is he like a AI practitioner or more of an artist? Or I'm just curious.
An artist.
Artist. Okay. So this is something that I get a lot of shit for. All of my dates hate me for this, but what is better? Really?
All of your dates? It comes up on your dates. It's just like topic number 2.
No.
What do you do for a living?
It's the argumentation. I ask you. I propose to you. What is better, really? Are the Avenger films better than like a Reservoir Dogs? What is better, really? I do think that it one day will have the capability to probably like pass a movie script Turing test where you couldn't tell if it was made by a human or a bot. But in terms of better, I don't know. I'm really picky with movies, so it's hard for me to say that. But yeah, I do think it's possible for sure someday that, all it really is just training it on a bunch of script data, and it'll be able to spit out something that's similar. How original it will be is a good question, but I do think it's possible for sure. Yeah.
We want to help you make something and mean something. And we say that phrase all the time because when you're making something and you know it means something, even if it's just to you, that's when you feel pretty good about what you're creating. The support for the Create Unknown in recent weeks has been incredible. Animators, artists, musicians, YouTubers, aspiring filmmakers, comedians, it is crazy how talented everybody in this community is. Consider joining the Create Unknown Patreon. Every dollar that comes through goes straight into the podcast and its community. That means more highlights videos. It means a big Minecraft project that's on the way. And eventually we'd like to manufacture custom piss bottles so you never have to leave your battle station. And being a patron unlocks participation in all of our live recordings. You've seen the roster of guests we've had. Having access to their minds is a unique opportunity. You can go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown or click the link that's in the description. Every little bit helps, and your support means absolutely everything to us. Patreon.com/thecreateunknown, links in the description. We appreciate you, Space Cowboys.
Because how original. So I just like 2 days ago started mildly dabbling with DALL-E 2. And for those unfamiliar, I was really kind of unfamiliar until I started playing with it. You just put in prompts. So I have an interest in coming up with stuff for my Sleep Warrior project, just seeing what pops. So I would put in prompts like sleeping warrior, sword, solar eclipse, 1980s anime, and then just see what it does. And then I don't know how it does what it does, but it spits out, 4 examples of what it thinks I want. What exactly is going on there? Is it taking every piece of artwork known to humanity and it has assigned certain tags or values to those things, and then it's sort of parsing them together and combining them in such a way? Like, what's going on with these AI art programs?
So on a high level, you have a model, right? I believe the DALL-E, I don't know the DALL-E model, but the Stable Diffusion model that's inspired by DALL-E, I know that one. It's about 3 gigs, I think it is, which is just basically all zeros and ones. Basically, that's all it is. And the way that they went about creating this model is they took a bunch of images from all over the internet. I don't know sources. I'm not entirely sure, but they took a bunch of images from all over the internet, and then they have what's called it takes data and then it makes like a lower representation of the data, and this allows you to trying to say something. I'm not trying to like go super nerdy with the vocabulary here, but it allows you to what's the word I'm looking for? Turning high representation data of an image to a low representation and doing that over a series of images. I'm talking maybe like 100,000 images. It allows you to create like a pattern. What am I trying to say?
An aggregate?
No. Like a it allows you to like understand like the overall pattern. There you go. The low representation allows you to understand the overall pattern of what's happening within these images, right? And then you feed it a prompt. So that is like what allows you to then cluster these images in different forms. And it gets pretty complicated from here, but it's just a bunch of like clustering, low representation, that the image goes to low representation. And then it then can add noise into that low representation. And then from that low representation, it's really good at then blowing that back up into an image. And then it spits out something that's unique and original. But again, what is original really, right? Because like if you say like Van Gogh in your prompt, and it creates something similar to Van Gogh, is that really original, right? Because it had to learn from Van Gogh, but then like, you know, artists that came after Van Gogh also took inspiration from. So it's a really interesting debate as to like, what is originality really at this moment? And it's something only AI could really force us to have the conversation about, you know?
Well, I think that's exactly what Zach's point was. He was suggesting that like, well, this is what human beings do anyway, is that they learn from, you know, whoever the great masters are, or maybe they also learn from whoever the not so great masters are. And then in their brains, they combine all of that stuff. And over years of practice, I mean, here's like a really clear example from music. There's a band called Godsmack.
Mm-hmm.
Godsmack was an Alice in Chains cover band. That's where the name comes from. And that's where their logo comes from. It comes from Alice in Chains. So for a while, Godsmack just played Alice in Chains songs. They learned how to play Alice in Chains songs. Eventually, they tweaked them enough to establish their own sound, and then they became famous as their own band called Godsmack. So there was some sort of like origin point of essentially copying another artist.
Sure.
Some spooky magic happened in the middle, and out comes what's quote unquote an original band later, but it really is kind of like a mix of being derivative and I guess original. So that is the question, is like, at what point does that, like, what is that spooky magic? And I think that my perspective on it is that human beings being unique will always be able to have a fresh input into that algorithm that will create something that the AI couldn't, since it's only using known data. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Before I reply, did you want to jump in, Matt? I don't want to leave you out of the conversation.
No. I am half tuned out on this because I'm listening and thinking of all the threads to pull on it. So like Kevin's saying, at what point, if everything is derivative to some degree, at what point is it not? And at what point is it? You know, like I'm sure if Rick Beato listened to Godsmack and he'd never heard of them before, he could hear their music and know that Alice in Chains was an influence in some way. I bet if he listed 5 bands that influenced Godsmack, Alice in Chains would be on that without any knowledge of them. So yeah, everything is derivative to some degree, but if there's variation with what humans are going to do in response to a thing or what direction they go in, well, can't AI just do that same wild card variation? Like, I really struggle with understanding what is happening and what can't happen, if anything.
Yeah, So I do agree. This is a very complicated discussion to have, and obviously we're not going to solve it here on this podcast. But you have to question, what is it that makes the original artist unique, right? If you look at a Van Gogh painting, a series of Van Gogh paintings, I think like the average viewer would be able to look at his painting and say, okay, the way that he like does his brushstrokes is really unique. It's really unique to Van Gogh, right? And so if you train an AI to take inspiration from Van Gogh, and then all it spits out is like the same amount of brushstrokes, is that like which part of it is innovating on what Van Gogh does is the real question, right? And I would say the same for a band. If a band has like a certain way that they like strum the guitar or something like that, and then another band comes up and takes inspiration from them, and they strum the guitar the same exact way, and like that's what they're known for. That's their bread and butter. But they change it just a little bit. They change the homework a little bit. Is that trying to like take away from what they're doing, or is that innovating? That's the big question, and I don't really know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't either. And that so we clipped that part out of our podcast with Zach, and there are a lot of really long comments. I think it's definitely sparked the most discussion out of anything we've ever clipped out before in 160 episodes of The Great Unknown. So it's definitely something people are interested in and want to talk about. I don't think we ever even considered this until we started seeing this AI art. I saw this guy
absolutely
just today on Twitter who is an incredible artist. Like the stuff that he's 3D sculpts of, Yoshi and Mario is incredible. It looks beautiful, but it has its own kind of style to it. And in like 2 seconds, he did a tweet of like some AI thread of the AI making stuff that looked just as good as what he who knows how many hours he spent, thousands of hours to get to that skill level, and then put his own unique, spin on the thing. And then in like 8 seconds, somebody else just kind of makes something that to the undiscerning human eye looks just as good. It's like, holy crap, that is really frustrating. I don't know. I don't know what you do other than smash your head against the wall in those scenarios if you're an artist.
Yeah, I think on that front, you have to just realize that, defeat is inevitable if you're going up against an AI, especially with things like art that's so subjective. Because sure, that artist has thousands of hours, but like the results of the AI is the combination of like maybe millions of hours that it's been trained on, to be able to like recognize patterns and be able to replicate those patterns in output. It is a really interesting discussion. And then one of the biggest confusing areas here is like, where does the credit go, right? If I create this masterpiece using DALL-E, do I get the credit? I mean, I came with the prompt, I invested a few minutes to filter through to make sure this one was good. Does the team at DALL-E get the credit? Did the artist they took the art from get the credit? Like where does the credit lie now,
I follow a lot of Twitter accounts that are idiotic to the max because that's how I like to use Twitter. And people have done fantastically stupid things with DALL-E. It's awesome. And I'm trying to think of a specific example here, but it's a combination of words really that they themselves came up with and other people on my feed couldn't. I couldn't come up with something that funny at all. Mario being fitted with George Washington's wooden teeth. So that's going to generate something that I don't know what it's going to look like, but a person came up with that, and that's
let me just mention one unique. Really that I laughed at so hard that I retweeted. I don't really usually retweet things. It's Papa John kissing a goblin, and and the image that this, I don't know. Oh, it is DALL-E Mini created this image of Papa John kissing a goblin that is so freaking funny. This goblin, I'll try to describe it. I'll tweet it with the Create Unknown Twitter account after this podcast is over so that everybody can see it. But it's this goblin who's kind of ape-like, who has this like shocked face with a very wide open mouth, has like a bright red heart shape on its forehead, has these very long kind of bat-like ears, and Papa John is just smushing his face against the cheek of this goblin to the point where his like cheeks and his lips are being sort of depressed with how hard he's kissing this goblin. And that's an example exactly of what you're talking about, Matt. It's like, I didn't think of that. And and the
There's
image
talent in
is so
thinking of
funny. It's so
Yeah,
how is it any
there's
different than
talent
coming
in-
up with a great joke?
I don't see it
It's the
as being
same
different
thing.
at all. Yeah, there's talent in coming up with a scenario that the AI can make a funny thing out of.
It's no different than writing a good joke, I don't think. But and then also choosing the image that's the funniest. So there's kind of like another layer to it. But I don't know. Like, I would love to ask you, should we be giving credit? Like, why wouldn't DALL-E be getting credit for us? Because they created the AI, right? That is able to generate this stuff that we all think is great or funny.
If you're asking me, I think right now is a very sensitive time, because if you are an artist that spent this 1,000 hours to get good at your craft, and then you know that DALL-E, all they did was just download your work and then, just let a computer run, and they're like, yeah, this is our work, this is our credit, you'd feel some type of way about that, So that's why I'm hesitant to say like DALL-E, they get the credit for this, because it's also next to impossible to point back to this specific artist that like influenced this work. And I'm not even sure if they know all the artists that contributed to their AI. You know what I mean? So it's like it's like a chain of credit at this point, right? It's like you have the maybe millions of artists that contributed to this. Then you have DALL-E and their teams that put in those hours to learn how to make this happen. And then you have like the person that came up with the funny prompt to generate Papa John kissing a goblin, right? And so you have the actual user that came up with the prompt, they get credit, and then you credit DALL-E, and you have to credit a million artists, because it's next to impossible to point to like who is responsible, like even then,
Right.
who took the picture of Papa John that was used, to influence this pic? It gets really confusing,
Yeah.
but
Right. For photographers, artists, it's like the whole of artistic humanity. But
I do have a question.
Engineers are involved.
I have a question. So this was inspired by the chat that we're having right now. And if you look at DALL-E as a tool, how close or not similar at all do you see DALL-E as a tool that it may be akin to like a Photoshop or a music producing app like Reason or Fruity Loops, right? Where they give you a tool and they give you a bunch of assets within the tool for you to then configure to make something, right? I'd argue that DALL-E is kind of the same, right? Like they're giving you a tool and you configure the words, the prompt to make art. Where do you guys stand on that?
Mm-hmm. I could see
that seems the same to
musicians
me.
being screwed like in the not too distant future at all by this. Like, so for years, music and YouTube videos was a problem, getting copyright claims and all of that sort of thing. And then you'd have to license music or find royalty free music or blah, 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 blah. Well, why won't there be a music DALL-E where you just type in like 9 Inch Nails elevator music and it spits out like a perfect 3-minute version of like elevator music that sounds sort of like 9 Inch Nails, and you use that and there's no copyright claim because you can't track it, right? Like how could the YouTube content ID pick it up if it's wholly unique in its construction and it's like audible construction? If you could do that, what do you need? I mean, at least in the business of like licensing music, what do you need them for anymore? That wipes out an entire industry.
I think that's a bit different, just because like the lobbying power the music industry has. I think they'd put all of their lawyers to make sure that like DALL-E can't make this happen. Because back in the early YouTube days, that's what their whole thing was about. Like they didn't want YouTube to take power away from them. Same with like Universal and all the movie companies. I don't think it's the same for artists. I don't think artists have a lot of power to fight back on DALL-E and other AI companies doing something like this. Thus, they do. You know what I mean? But I do agree that it'd be really confusing. Like what? Like it's your favorite lead singer's voice, but not exactly. Like it's an original beat. Like that'd be really confusing to navigate. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a sound alike. Like that. Those are the types of tracks that you use in karaoke, right? Like that's what. Or if you buy like a karaoke machine, and not if you do it at like a karaoke place, they'll have the real song there because those are licensed. They pay a license to play the real song. Right. But you can buy those like home karaoke machines, right? That have like those sound alikes to sing. Those are legal. Somebody had to make those. What's the difference? True. I don't know.
Very true.
It seems murky.
I think the only difference is just how much money they're willing to put behind taking it to court.
Yeah, but I mean, the music industry has lost a lot of these battles over the years. They've had to really eat a lot of crow in terms of what they fought, what they shut Napster down over, and then what something like Spotify is, right? Today, or YouTube Music. And it gets, even TikTok, now it's at the point where they almost force singer-songwriters to just release a song on TikTok. So that's how they know it'll be well received or not. It's weird.
Fair enough.
What I struggle with on this is trying to get a sense of kind of what the Overton window is on it. And if somebody's not familiar with the Overton window, it's a political term that describes the set of opinions that are acceptable to the average person at a given time. So, like, for example, 100 years ago, somebody who was running for president, if they'd been divorced 3 times, it would have been a tremendous liability to their campaign. Whereas now, attitudes have shifted and people don't really care so much. The window there has shifted. Well, there's this element of acceptability with everything that we're talking about that continues to evolve and change. And I don't know where that's headed. If there's a point where people say synthetic, artificially created music is not okay with me, it's not music to me. Well, they're pretty much okay with auto-tune now and, like producing a track to the nth degree. But some people really value live music because it doesn't have any of those elements. So some people love digital art and crazily Photoshop things. Other people really want a straight up charcoal sketch of a thing, so the attitudes change over time on this. And I think about it with sports constantly because there's this perpetual debate about what records matter and who is the best hitter, pitcher, whatever the sport is. But there are really basic things that we're comfortable with that it's just kind of happened over time. We're not comfortable with steroids in sports. Very few people think that steroids are fair and that a player who uses steroids, their performance could be compared with the performance of somebody 100 years ago. Well, what about somebody who responds really well to Tylenol and Aleve? They have this nagging muscle pain that over-the-counter stuff that's $4 a bottle at Walmart takes that away. In 1921, they would have had to play through that pain and probably performed worse. Well, nobody looks at a sports record now and says, like, LeBron James doesn't have to suffer from headaches the way, Lou Alcindor did. It's insane because our attitudes have morphed so naturally over time as to discount that thing. So I don't know what's going to be discounted, what we're going to seize and focus on. I think it's going to help determine what is legitimate thought, what is legitimate art, what is legitimate originality, where the thread pull stops on things like how many people it took to create a thing. I mean, if we go to the crazy lengths with this podcast, there's me and Kevin, and then there's Ben and Isaac and Conrad and Laterman and all the people in the Discord. But you know what? Somebody invented the Rodecaster we use to record it, and somebody developed the buttons on the thing. I mean, there are it's the iPencil. 50 million people are involved in making this podcast. But we obviously don't put them in the credits. Well, maybe the attitudes change where we start to recognize all of these things more. Maybe we say, it's too complex now. Let's just completely ignore it and discard it. It doesn't matter. I don't know. But that stuff seems to me to be at the heart of a lot of what we're talking about. I just don't know the answer.
I think the only pushback I'd have to that is, the people that made the Rode mics and the keyboards and all that stuff that you use, they directly benefit from you purchasing it, right? And I think that like the issues that artists have is that they don't have any benefit from this, and yet like their entire life work can be replicated in 8 seconds, like the story that Kevin was saying. I think that's the only difference here with the AI stuff is there's no like program to reward the people that input data against their will. You know, because like the internet is this kind of like ominous thing where the rules are very gray area. You know, like even when I make videos, I'll pull images from Google and I'm like, I'm not sure if I have the rights to use this, but this is hidden for this video, so I'm just going to take a risk, you know?
Well, that's the thing. I was going to say that's one of those Overton things, because you don't have the rights to do that. But at some point, we just collectively decided, like, what are we going to do about this? Like, everybody just steals images from wherever, and it's impossible to track, and it's impossible to chase everybody down. It's impossible to hire lawyers for and send cease and desists. It's impossible. So people have just thrown their hands up over stuff like that, over stuff like ripped images from, or even like video clips. And there's been a lot of what was thought to be a problem 8 years ago in terms of putting copyrighted things in your content. Now people are like, they laugh at you for even thinking that that would be a problem. It's like, okay, boomer.
Sure.
You're really worried about stealing this image for a thumbnail? Are you kidding?
I guess to Matt's point, what is probably going to happen is like in this post AI image generated world is artists will understand that things are different now. I think like if you go back in time and you look at like photographers, like that was a very lucrative thing you can do, like early 2000s or something like that. You could take photos and like make really good money selling photos.
Oh, yeah.
But nowadays, there's so many photos that are publicly available for free, but also that are paid, but it's easy to like rip them, that if you are making a conscious decision to be a photographer in 2022, you should have understanding that like there's a chance that you're not going to make a lot of money these days unless you have something really good going for you. So to Matt's point, I do think that is a possibility in terms of how artists can change the way that they view. It sounds sad and bleak right now, but I mean, this is the way the world works, right? Like,
well, yeah, that's a really important point to me, is that you just have to recognize that this happens all the time, for better and worse. The photography thing is a great example because I've seen so many people develop skills with coming up with images. You know, like I'm trying not to use the word photography because they do it in such a broad range of ways. But like you can tell, and this is to the earliest days of Facebook. You know, you know somebody, you follow along with them well enough. They get into aesthetic things and creativity and whatever, and you can tell over a period of years that they've begun to see things differently. Like the fact that they're putting pictures up of a thing, that's cool, that's photography, but they're looking at the world in a different way than they did a few years ago, and that's reflected through their photography. That's a good thing. It sucks that the golden age of them getting something for it has passed by, but we're all kind of better too, that it's so easy that you can go on Google and get exactly the right image for your video, the thing that fits perfectly and is going to bang for you. And you can do that in like 4 minutes. Kevin talked about the art that he was looking at with Sleep Warrior stuff. It wasn't 100%. It's not like you could have screenshotted it and run with it, but it was conceptually close. Like it advanced. It seemed to advance his concept of how he'd want that art to be in the future. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Kevin, but it seemed useful in that way. So there's just this constant pro and con list that I cannot come out on either side of anything with like literally any topic we've talked about. It's maddening because I draw conclusions like 50,000 times a day. I love judgment. I like loading up somebody's Twitter account, just being like, oh God, they suck. I'm not going to follow them. I hate this person. Or, you know, like, I love clear judgment. And it's so twisted and murky to me on everything here where it's like, yeah, there's all this nuance. I don't know how it's going to turn out. And I love this part and I hate that part. And like, what do we do?
Can I just have a total aside that I want to bring up that has literally nothing to do with any of this? Yes, I can. Okay, thank you. When you were talking, here's a pet peeve of mine that Matt, we've never talked about before, but it reminded me when you were talking about like Lou Alcindor and the Aleve or whatever. A huge pet peeve of mine is when people talk about modern sports teams like destroying old sports teams in an effort to delegitimize them, where it's like, oh, like Bob Cousy sucks, like he couldn't start today. And it's like, yeah, right. Okay. In Bob Cousy's time, they were like smoking cigarettes at halftime. It was a completely, and they were probably still having day jobs in between like games. Like it was, you cannot compare these things. It is so ridiculous between like the way the teams traveled. They weren't flying first class to their next game. They were probably in some like horrific bus. I don't know. There are like a gabillion different reasons why the advantages that a LeBron James has today, whether it's like ice baths and sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber to like recover, compared to Lou Alcindor or Bob Cousy or like Babe Ruth eating like chili dogs during the 7th inning stretch. Yeah. It's the stupidest level of discourse that I come across, and I see it all the time. It's infuriating because it showcases a complete disregard for the context of an era in which a thing occurred.
Yeah. And even on the mental side, we've talked in the last few weeks a lot about attitudes with football. Like we've talked about this in the Discord server too. NRM he was a decent football player in his day, and he loves the Ohio State University Buckeyes. So we've talked a bit of football. But we were talking about like the old people in the 50s, 60s who they really wanted to hurt other people on the field. Like they truly wanted to injure somebody, not for the cruelty and the meanness of it, but as like a form of winning almost. That like, if you aren't tough enough to get through a play, then you've lost, and that attitude is very different now. Well, is Dick Butkus as mean a player if he goes to college in 2019 and like Nick Saban is his coach? Does he develop in the same way where he just goes out and wants to eviscerate and tear limbs off other players' body? Well, probably not. So yeah, you're totally right. Comparing those eras with anything is insanity. But Jabrils, I wanted to ask one completely different thing here. All the stuff we've talked about is based on uncertainty. How does somebody like you, who's a creative, you've got the engineering side, you've got just a bunch of different things. How do you see yourself as being relevant in perpetuity? So if all the stuff that you work on is hell bent on eliminating you, it's like it's weird in that respect. So what's gonna make you stand out just as much 50 years from now? What's the thing that the tech can never, ever do anything about?
Wow, what a great question. Wasn't expecting to have a existential life crisis on a Tuesday. Thanks, Matt. That's a great question. I think that this is my current thought process. As long as you stay like on the cutting edge, you'll always be all right, because there will always be a need for someone to understand this information and also apply it, like from a practitioner standpoint. But I also think like on a more general level, I think that a lot of us humans need to shift more to utilizing our brains and like design. Granted, I haven't thought too deeply into this. Okay, so bear with me. But all the things that are coming for, I don't want to sound too bleak, but like coming for our jobs and whatnot, they had to been designed, right? And there's an element of needing to understand like what's happening with these tools that will always have value, right? I want to go off on a side tangent real quick. Can I go off on a quick side tangent?
Yes. Do it.
At the very beginning, we were talking about AI and its application. And one thing that I wanted to say, but didn't have the opportunity to, is that the most important thing when it comes to AI and like, I think we're talking about people trusting AI, I believe it was. The most important thing that I advocate for when it comes to AI is education, educating people on like how far you should trust in AI. I think actually, Matt, you were saying police, like the application of police using AI. That is probably one of the scariest applications for me. I remember watching a video or reading an article, I think it was, of a police agency that was using AI to classify like potential suspects or something like this. And I was like, it is too early to be doing this, number one. Number two, these people are not equipped to even like understand what is going on the base level. Number three, who is the company supplying this? Are they just trying to turn a quick buck? Like, what is the data going into it? Like, it's just like the most doomer situation possible. So for me, it's like, I don't think you can stop AI from coming, but what you can do to prevent like dystopian outcomes is educating people on like what exactly is going on under the hood, right? And I think I play a part in that. I definitely have some catching up to do because the space is moving so fast and so many different like techniques every day that's being released. But education is hugely important, more important than anything, right? You can get into an airplane, a Boeing 757, and not really have to have an understanding of what's going on there, right? Because the people are vetted, like the professionals, right? Yeah. But anyone can make an AI algorithm and then sell it for profit. You know what I mean? And that's the scary part. So the only real way to counter that, I think, is just education. You gotta educate people what's going on.
Well, speaking of education and encouragement, I wanted to end on a little bit of a positive note here. It'll start negative but it will end positively. So, you made this great video called "I've Quit Following My Dreams and You Should Too." And as part of that video, you talked about being like directly discouraged by various people to stop making games, to stop bothering trying to learn how to code. It's too hard. It's too complex. It's too much time. Just don't bother, essentially. Now, part of the point of this podcast overall, conceptually, is to do the opposite, is to really serve as a beacon to encourage people. And we do that in different ways. And in some ways, I think maybe we do discourage people, but I think that is really just trying to be more like expectation setting than anything. Ultimately, our goal is to encourage people to work hard, to try, to do things, to fail over and over again and get better and learn from their mistakes. I can't imagine telling anybody to just not bother at all. That's a really weird thing to me. I don't know what these people surrounding you got out of telling you to give up, but eventually you climbed out of that on your own. You decided to, after a period of giving up, get back into the driver's seat and start learning, software engineering on your own. So here's the prompt to use some coding language. Here's the prompt. People are listening who need encouragement. Maybe it's just one person. Maybe it's everyone. What would you tell them? What would you tell them that you wish somebody could have told you that wouldn't have, derailed you all of those years?
First of all, I thought you were calling me out. I was like, yo, what is with this title, man? You need to change your title.
No.
It's YouTube. I had to do a little clickbaity, but it's also kind of true to the story. But let's see. This is tough because if I had a time machine, I wouldn't go back and tell myself, stick with it, kid. I don't think I would do that because I like where I'm at now and I would be too afraid of changing that path. Like maybe I might be working at Audible or something, coding on the back end, you know what I mean? Like, but if I had to encourage someone that was looking for a pick me up, I would definitely say, try a lot of things. I would say try a lot of things, as many things as you possibly can, because with that contrast, there will be something that like dominates your thoughts. And that's a really easy way to discover passion. When you're thinking about something that you'd rather be doing, that's how you know, like I'd argue what you should be doing. I don't know how motivating that is, but I definitely would say make sure to try like as many things as possible.
That's why I'm quitting my job to play with the main gear. Because it's all I think about. I'm like, you know what? This is what I'm meant to do. Yeah. Sorry, Kevin. You're on your own.
Hey, yo, full circle. I respect that.
That's right. All right. Well, I like that. I like that advice. That's good. And for people who haven't seen the video, I definitely encourage you to check that out, because that's part of the point of the video, are all the different types of games that you started, didn't finish, moved on to something else, found out what you clicked with and what you didn't click with. I think that that's a really integral part of any creator's journey. All right, we have one last question for you, then you're out of here. Something that we'd like to end on and ask a lot of the people that we have on the podcast, and that is, in your estimation, what makes an interesting person? How does one become an interesting person?
Ooh, I have a very cliche answer. I want to try and make it sound a little more interesting. I think I think anyone that is willing to be wrong, like on a general sense, right? And I mean this in the sense of, it's really easy to like fall in line with like a certain like ideology or a certain behavior, whatever it is. But I think people that are willing to be wrong and like kind of stand up for what they truly believe in, because their gut is telling them, that's what makes really interesting people, or at least from my experiences. Those people you want to stick around and learn, like what's going on here. Fill me in.
Mm-hmm. It's good. A little heterodox never really hurt anyone, I don't think. Look up heterodox.
Yeah, not too much though. Not too much. You're right.
Don't
go too crazy with it. We do live in a society, after all.
We have a society we're trying to maintain, after all. All right, that's it. We didn't get to half my questions. That's okay. We'll have you back. Thanks, Jabrils. Really excited about all the things that you're working on. You definitely are a unique person. Just look at your channel. It's always, you never know what you're going to come up with. You are like kind of the master of surprises, I think, in that regard. So everybody check out Jabrils' channel, Jabrils. We will be here next week with Nile Red to talk about blowing things up on camera. That's it. All right, we're out of here. We will see you next Tuesday. Don't turn that into an acronym. All right, we're out of here. See you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week, and the recent support has been amazing. Sidpoke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezergood, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. Thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Farrakhan, Jen Mefasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Peddler, Risebread, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Videoger. And a tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang commanders: Atrocious Scuff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight, Vinthos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, Jelxies, and of course, Trevstead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. And a special thanks to Main Gear for powering all of our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.